Hello Monster Heads, welcome back to our channel. Brace yourselves for some thrills and chills, because in today's video, we will explore the immortal plant kaiju Biollante, who gave Godzilla a run for his money. A Lovecraftian fusion of roses and Godzilla's cells, merged with the consciousness of a young woman, Biollante turned out to be one of the most unsettling yet tragic monsters of the Godzilla universe, and an all-time favorite of fans. Biollante, the first new major antagonist of the Heisei series of Godzilla movies, was created as an allegory for the disastrous effects of genetic engineering. Towering over an 80-meter Godzilla, the 120-meter-tall Biollante not only defeated Godzilla once, but is also the kaiju whom Godzilla could not kill at the end of the storyline. Being a tri-bred monster, Biollante radiated a sense of Lovecraftian horror, tapping into humanity's biggest fear, the fear of the unknown. Despite her obnoxious nature, the phenomenal impact that Biollante had with just her one movie appearance on kaiju fans only forces one to wonder why she hasn't received a standalone movie yet. With that thought in mind, let's begin this video about everything there is to know about this plant monster, who may not be Lovecraftian by origin, but definitely is by design and nature. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Tracing the origins of Biollante, a genetic nightmare. Biollante is a genetic cocktail of rose, human, and Godzilla DNA. Introduced in 1989's Godzilla vs. Biollante, this antagonist comes with an origin story that is as terrifying as it is tragic, making her a product of science that converted innocence into monstrosity. It all began in 1984, when Dr. Genichiro Shiragami attempted to create a plant species, which could survive the harsh weather of the fictional desert country Saradia. His efforts were thwarted when a bomb attack destroyed his laboratory, ruining his experiments and killing his daughter Erika. Wanting to preserve Erika's soul forever, a devastated Shiragami spliced up a rose bush with Erika's DNA. Roses were her favorite flowers after all. 5 years later, when the earthquake generated by Mount Mahara's volcanic eruption almost destroyed the genetically engineered rose bushes, a panicked Shiragami spliced up a single rose with Godzilla's DNA in order to make it indestructible. The tri-bred fusion enabled the plant to grow at a remarkable rate, developing sentience and enabling it to move on its own, thus becoming a kaiju, whose name was derived from Norse mythology by her creator. Biollante is the name, the spirit of a plant that appears in Norse mythology, but that plant has a human spirit. The terrifying saga of Biollante. Biollante appeared in two forms in the 1989 movie. First, in her blooming rose form, and after regeneration, into a bizarre Godzilla-like form with plant parts. Flower form. In her flower form, Biollante stood at a height of 85 meters, just 5 meters more than Godzilla, and weighed somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 metric tons. In her first appearance, Biollante had a gigantic rose for a head, with a menacing set of teeth traps at the center. Biollante's terrifying form comprised thick, plant-like tendrils, which extended beyond her bodily structure. The ends of the tendrils had bulb-like mouths lined with teeth, which resembled the carnivorous plant Venus flytrap. On her lower body, Biollante had a glowing meat sac called the nucleus. The presence of throbbing veins and wrinkles made the fleshy appendage look like a brain. Even in her flower form, Biollante could let out menacing screams, which often sounded like wails and cries, further highlighting her tragic circumstances. Godzilla form. In her final form, Biollante emerged as a Godzilla-like monster, but much more gigantic in form, with a height of 120 meters and weighing a whopping 200 metric tons. Her former rose head was replaced with a crocodilian mouth, with rows of sharp teeth on both the upper and lower jaws, while sharp tusks jutted out from the sides of her maw. Interestingly, Biollante's creator, Shinichiro Kobayashi, was a dentist by profession. The fully evolved Biollante retained her brain-like nucleus, located on her chest, but grew more tendrils, some with spear-like ends, and some with Venus flytrap-like jaws. Beneath Biollante's tangled mesh of vines and plant tissues were additional 4 root-like appendages for mobility. Biollante also had rough skin like Godzilla, and some Godzilla-like scales on the top of her head. As Shiragami said, Godzilla and Biollante were almost the same creatures. While Godzilla was animal, Biollante was a plant. Godzilla vs. Biollante's storyline. In the movie Godzilla vs. Biollante, Godzilla encountered Biollante for the first time at Lake Ashi, on the shores of which Dr. Shiragami had set up his second laboratory. 5 years after the the events of 1984, when Shiragami's laboratory was destroyed by bombings carried out by the organization Biomajor in Saradia. The scientist had moved to Japan. A terrarium outside his lab on the shores of Lake Ashi contained Shiragami's most prized possessions, the genetically modified roses, contained traces of his daughter Erika's DNA. In the hopes of connecting with Erika's soul telepathically, Shiragami brought in young psychic Miki Sagusa, who, however, couldn't detect any telepathic signals from the roses. Soon after, an earthquake occurred, destroying some of the roses, prompting Shiragami to empower a single rose with Godzilla's G-cells. Shiragami had procured the G-cells from the Japanese Self-Defense Forces in exchange for creating the anti-nuclear energy bacteria, or ANEB, a biological weapon supposedly to be used against Godzilla. While Godzilla's cells took over the genetic composition of the rose, turning it into Biollante, 2 Biomajor agents and a Saradian agent broke into Shiragami's laboratory, only to be attacked by Biollante in her flower form. Biollante then navigated to Lake Ashi and planted herself on the bottom of the lake. Her cries caught the attention of Godzilla, who was freshly awakened from Mount Mahara. Shiragami theorized that Godzilla responded to Biollante's shrieks because they contain the same genes. It is at this time when the psychic Miki could feel the presence of a human consciousness within Biollante, which Shiragami derived to be his daughter's. In the battle that ensued between Godzilla and his plant counterpart, Biollante tried to strangle Godzilla with her tendrils, but he set himself free by blasting atomic breath at his opponent. The atomic blast caused Biollante's petals to fall off and hemorrhaged her nucleus. Biollante attempted to protect her body from Godzilla's atomic attacks by building a shield of vines, which too was destroyed by Godzilla. The king of the monsters then incinerated Biollante, who converted into glowing spores shaped like rose petals and dispersed away into the sky, forcing these words out of Shiragami: "It cannot die after all. It's immortal." Biollante didn't die, indeed. Emerging a few days later near Wakasa Bay, her spores appeared in the sky, descended into the ground, and transformed into a gigantic beast, towering over Godzilla. The king of the monsters appeared repulsed at the sight of Biollante's menacing spear-headed tendrils crawling towards him, which easily pierced Godzilla's arms, while also wrapping around him in a strong grip. Spurs of energy flickered through Biollante's body as she prepared to spew acidic sap at Godzilla. Biollante locked Godzilla's head in a biting grip, spewing her venomous sap at him until Godzilla shot a ray of atomic blast down her throat, causing a destructive effect on Biollante's cell division. Earlier, the Japan Self-Defense Forces had infected Godzilla with the anti-nuclear energy bacteria. During Godzilla's battle with Biollante, her radioactive sap increased Godzilla's body temperature and activated the ANEB in his system, weakening him further. Godzilla was soon incapacitated, staggered to the shores, and fell face-first into the ocean, thus succumbing to Biollante's attack. Meanwhile, the plant kaiju, also heavily destroyed by Godzilla's heat waves, converted into petal-shaped spores and floated away into space. As Miki heard Biollante say, "Thank you," Erika's face appeared in the spores one last time. Particularly at this moment, Godzilla remained unconscious while Biollante escaped into space, making her the Heisei-era kaiju who managed to defeat Godzilla. P.S. Godzilla did eventually recover, and with his opponent gone, he made his way into the ocean. Biollante's role in Space Godzilla's origin. In 1994's Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, Biollante appeared through stock footage and played a crucial role in Space Godzilla's origins. When G-Force scientists found Space Godzilla's cells to be similar to Godzilla's G-cells, it was theorized that when Biollante transformed into spores and floated into space following her final battle with Godzilla, some of her cells passed through a black hole and were exposed to the energy of supernovas. As a result, the cells started rapidly evolving and assimilating crystalline organisms, thus forming the crystalline extraterrestrial kaiju, Space Godzilla. However, another theory was that the G-cells floated into space on Mothra's wings in 1993 when she wanted to stop a meteor headed for Earth. Biollante's unique abilities and powers. Tendrils. Because of Biollante's tribrid nature, the kaiju was equipped with a gamut of unique powers. Being a plant kaiju, Biollante's most used weapon was her tendrils, which she could extend beyond her body to attack Godzilla at a distance. In her flower form, Biollante managed to strangle Godzilla with them, and in her final form, they pierced Godzilla's flesh. They also created a shield to resist Godzilla's atomic breath. Mobility. Despite her plant-like structure, Biollante was able to advance towards Godzilla in a menacing manner with her 4 stubby root-like appendages, emerging from underneath the mesh of plant tissues and vines. In her flower form, she mostly remained rooted in Lake Ashi, but in her final form, Biollante propelled herself forward to attack Godzilla. Corrosive sap. In her final form, Biollante gained the ability to spit out corrosive sap from her tendrils, and also from her giant crocodilian maw. The sap appeared to be radioactive, as the sap stream inside her body could be seen glowing a bright orange before coming out of her mouth. Biollante regurgitated the corrosive corrosive sap on Godzilla's head, which increased the latter's body temperature, resulting in the multiplication of the weakening anti-nuclear energy bacteria in his system. As per the Godzilla Giant Monster Diagram Encyclopedia, the book about Toho monsters, Biollante generated the corrosive sap by combining diamonds located inside her head. How cool is that? The 1992 manga series, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, showed Biollante's sap, when trickling down like blood, was also corrosive, as it burned Godzilla's hands after he gripped her vines and ripped them off. Energy spores. Biollante had the ability to transform into a cloud of spores when wounded and ascend into the sky. Using this power, she survived both her fights with Godzilla, once in her flower form and then in her final form. Regeneration. Biollante contained Godzilla's G-cells, as a result of which her regenerative ability was highly enhanced. In her flower form, when her cell division was affected abnormally by Godzilla's atomic rays, Biollante escaped by transforming into a cloud of spores, only to regenerate into a colossal kaiju with deadlier features and unique powers later. The 2012 comic series Godzilla, Cataclysm, further elaborated on Biollante's regenerative ability. In the comics, which she was burned down to a tiny mash of plant tissues by Godzilla's atomic breath, the mash rapidly began sprouting vines with which she later restrained Destoroyah, enabling Godzilla to kill him. Immortality. The creator of Biollante, Dr. Genichiro Shiragami, declared the tribrid kaiju as immortal, owing to her enhanced regenerative ability and her power of transforming into spores when wounded. Tunneling. Biollante used tunneling as one of her most effective attack techniques. She could dig her vines underground and have them rise up at a distance to surprise attack her opponents. This ability was predominantly seen in the two comic series, Godzilla Cataclysm and Godzilla, Rulers of Earth. In Godzilla, King of the Monsters manga, using her tunneling ability, Biollante was able to entrap Godzilla in a green jail by sending her vines underground and having them rise up like jail bars from the ground. Comparative Might, where Biollante stands among Monster vs. Legendary Titans. Kong. With her unique set of powers and colossal size, let's see where Biollante stands among Monster vs. Legendary Titans, namely Kong, Godzilla, and the new villain on the block, Scar King. Biollante, in her final form as seen in the 1989 movie, is taller than the full-grown Kong in Monsterverse, weighing more than double of Kong's weight. Thus, Biollante would have a natural advantage over Kong. Meanwhile, Kong would have the upper hand when it comes to mobility, as Kong would be able to leap around and perch himself on high structures to launch surprise attacks, none of which, we are guessing, Biollante would be capable of. However, given how easily Biollante's tendrils pierce through Godzilla's rugged skin, they would prove extremely dangerous to Kong. The King of Skull Island is also susceptible to heat, and with Biollante spewing her acidic sap, Kong would be at a serious disadvantage. In terms of raw power, Biollante with her regenerative ability and acidic sap wins the battle against Kong hands down, because there's no way Kong can physically reach Biollante without getting tangled in her venomous vines. However, if equipped with this newfound axe, Kong should be able to slice up Biollante's tendrils and maneuver his way in for a closer shot at her nucleus. Godzilla. Now let's see how Biollante would fare against the Monsterverse Godzilla, who is now 20 meters taller and much more powerful than his Heisei-era predecessor, but still weighing less and smaller in size than Biollante. In the 1989 movie, Biollante managed to defeat Godzilla once, as he was already infected with the Aneb bacteria and had not managed to replenish his nuclear energy requirement. Biollante's acidic spit increased Godzilla's body temperature, activating the Aneb bacteria, which rendered him unconscious. Let's not forget, it's only because Biollante broke into spores that she was able to escape. Otherwise, Godzilla would have been the end of Biollante, not once, but twice. Similarly, the Monsterverse Godzilla can fire his atomic blast in his signature style, down Biollante's throat, causing it to explode out the back of her head, and eventually degenerating her cells. After all, his atomic breath has an adverse effect on Biollante's cell division, causing it to break down. Godzilla can also fry up Biollante's nucleus with his heat ray, making it hemorrhage and malfunction. However, in order to do so, Godzilla would have to maneuver through Biollante's venom spewing mouth tendrils, which could be somewhat of a challenge for him, but given his tall swishes, powerful claws, and brute force, there's nothing that Godzilla cannot handle. He is the king of the monsters after all. Scar King. Let's also see how things would pan out if Biollante was to face off against the devilish Scar King, the new Monsterverse villain introduced in Godzilla x Kong, the new Empire trailer. The gigantic orangutan-like baddie appears significantly larger in size than both Kong and Godzilla, making him a challenging foe for Biollante. While Biollante could spew her acidic sap at Scar King and attack him with her mouth tendrils extending across several meters, Scar King's enhanced intelligence would enable him to already have a battle plan in place. For example, Scar King, who commands an army of smaller apes, could distract Biollante with his minions, while he took a closer shot shot at the plant kaiju himself. Because of his merciless nature, Scar King would not hesitate to dispense off as many of his minions as possible. Also, despite his size, Scar King would prove to be far more agile than Biollante, who moves with their stubby root-like tendrils, which would give Scar King a natural advantage over the latter. Scar King, who wears the spine of an animal like a sash, also appears adept at using weapons, which he can use to chop off Biollante's tendrils or attack her nucleus. Let's not forget, in order to match up to Scar King, both Kong and Godzilla have been given upgrades in the new Empire. While Kong wears a transformer-like gauntlet in one arm, Godzilla's dorsal spikes emit a neon pink glow instead of his signature blue. The future of Biollante in the Godzilla universe, with her mind-boggling origin story, insane set of powers, and only one film appearance. Biollante is undoubtedly a niche monster, catering to old-school fans of the Godzilla universe. To introduce Biollante to the MonsterVerse audience would be a bit of a risk, but surely nothing that Michael Dougherty cannot handle. In 2019, the Godzilla King of the Monsters director had said that he would love to bring back Biollante as Godzilla's nemesis in a future MonsterVerse movie, with Ghidorah and Rodan taking over in King of the Monsters, and Mechagodzilla and Scar King as the antagonists for the two subsequent sequels. Hopeful fans can only look forward to a third sequel with Biollante. Meanwhile, kaiju such as Gigan, Destoroyah, Space Godzilla, Hedorah, and Megalon are also in the running for a spot in MonsterVerse. Biollante would make an awesome MonsterVerse villain for a number of reasons. Biollante is visually terrifying and wildly inventive in concept, so when paired with Legendary Pictures' innovative vision and the MonsterVerse team's creative modification, Biollante will surely up the ante for Godzilla's opponents. Also, the concept of plant-based terror will add a sense of uniqueness to the gallery of MonsterVerse's baddies. Godzilla movies have always come with underlying environmental themes, and hence, including Biollante would enable the makers to build a story on ecological concerns. But Biollante must be accompanied by the emotional significance that made her such a tragic kaiju, which would also allow the makers to continue the MonsterVerse theme of Godzilla having to clean up the mess created by humans. How can we expect the narrative to unfold? So, in the case of a future Biollante movie, how can we expect the narrative to unfold in MonsterVerse? We can explore a couple of ideas, but before we delve into Biollante's possible cinematic future, let us tell you that all of this is just wishful thinking at this point. Eco-terrorist Alan Jonah from King of the Monsters got us thinking that what if a legally procured Titan DNA such as Godzilla's G-cells fell into the wrong hands, who then combined it with an exotic plant species from Hollow Earth, resulting in a monstrous plant kaiju with Biollante's abilities. Here's another idea. What if an expedition to Skull Island by Monarch led to the discovery of a unique plant specimen, a combination of a rose and a Venus flytrap, which is brought back to the laboratory and spliced with G-cells to make it last in an environment outside of Skull Island? Or maybe a rogue Monarch scientist with an ulterior motive like Dr. Emma Russell from King of the Monsters would splice the plant specimen with the DNA of a loved one lost. Meanwhile, eagle-eyed fans must have noticed that MonsterVerse has already teased a version of a plant-related kaiju in King of the Monsters. The monster named Amuluk appeared on Monarch's laboratory screen as a missing Titan, which was supposed to be stationed at Outpost 66 in Russia. The Godzilla vs. Kong prequel graphic novel Godzilla Dominion elaborated on Amuluk as a monster who is covered in old vegetation and can manipulate plant matter to attack its opponents with long tendrils. Marvelous verdict. Needless to say, Biollante is the undisputed queen of unique kaiju, originating from what was once a rose, with traces of human consciousness and immortal energy, representing humanity's grief over the loss of loved ones. Despite Biollante's successful run in video games and comic series, she is among those frustratingly underused monsters who deserve to have the limelight shine on them in MonsterVerse. What are your thoughts on Biollante making her comeback in a MonsterVerse movie? Tell us in the comments below, and if you liked our video, please give us a shout out and watch this space for more marvelous content. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe.